question goes to the whole panel about the role of volunteering and being a volunteer in all of your project and also your personal experience and professional growth. Like, do you think we promote enough volunteerism and just giving time and energy and resources to like peace building?
Okay, we'll get a few more comments and questions. Yes.
Hello, I'm from Germany. I want to ask something to Verena. You talked about the Kurdish fraternity and about Kurdistan as a de facto state. Iraqi Kurdistan exercises all the elements of statehood, but as you know, their language is a little bit difficult because they have many dialects, and for example, the Kurmanji, Sorani, or Luri, and the dialects differ from each other so much that the speakers of different dialects do not necessarily understand each other. How they deal with this problem there?
Right. Yep.
Hi, I also studied war and terrorism, and to both of our UN folks in the room and to you, I'm curious. I studied under John Mearsheimer, a known realist and someone who studies a lot of power politics. And I got not the highest marks on paper, good marks, but not the highest marks because he asserted in his grading that power politics, war, and so forth are what underlies the UN. And so I'm curious what those in the room have the opinion on when it comes to power politics accomplishing the Sustainable Development Goals versus other priorities that the UN has because of the security structures and the P5.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Sorry? Oh, yes, and then.
So this is mainly for Mariam and Ariane that are talking about gender equality and gender violence. I think the question of whether development triggers gender equality or gender equality development is actually really interesting. I do not believe, and it's actually been studied so much, if women actually have very different faculties than men that will make them more able to be less corrupt or stuff like this is actually true because it's been studied. But I do believe that it is kind of a cycle that feeds itself in a very natural way. Talking about opening more spaces for women to actually be occupying public and private life spaces is such an important discussion that we need to be having. And it's not only about talking about quotas, because it's also been studied as well, and it's a really interesting conversation. But I think something that has been mentioned here, not only in like gender equality conversation, is the fact that people themselves should actually be doing that. And for example, for that, I don't know how you've been doing, because I know that you work with a lot of victims of these kinds of abuses. But for example, for us, it's been really helpful when we get, when survivors themselves of sexual exploitation or of labor exploitation come and explain, or themselves take the role as lawyers, themselves take these roles, because it's kind of, they're the best people to actually talk about what is happening in the world. So I would like to know how you are including these people in the process of change to opening more spaces for gender equality or for whichever work you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. If we could please keep the comments much shorter than that. Thank you.
My question is to the person who was talking about gender-based violence. I just want you to tell us more about your experiences with gender-based violence among women living with disabilities. Thank you.
Okay, I would like to open to the panel now. Any comments or questions on? Yeah.
I wanted to address these two questions. First, Verena, thank you very much, and I'm glad you looked at the SDGs, because this is not incidental or ancillary, it's core. And SDG 16 is for peaceful, inclusive societies for a reason. And indeed, as you noted, indicators include conflict-related deaths per 100,000 population. And there's a tremendous intention to focus on preservation of peace and ending of war as a core part of this agenda. So this is not incidental. It's also a core aim of Secretary General Guterres to link the two sides of the house of the UN chambers, the economic and social side and the security side. These are in different structures right now. There's the Security Council, there's ECOSOC. ECOSOC is, in a way, together with something called the High-Level Political Forum, the political home of the Sustainable Development Goals. The issues of war and peace are based at the UN Security Council. It's an artificial separation, and Secretary General Guterres has been emphasizing this on every occasion. When he became Secretary General early on 24th of January this year, he gave a speech, "We need a global response that addresses the root causes of conflict and integrates peace, sustainable development, and human rights in a holistic way from conception to execution. Our priority is prevention of conflict, of the worst effects of natural disasters, and of other man-made threats to the cohesion and well-being of societies. The best means of prevention and of sustaining peace is inclusive and sustainable development. The universal nature of the 2030 Agenda and its pledge to leave no one behind ties it to sustaining peace. It is important to recognize that the links between the 2030 Agenda and sustaining peace are found not only in Goal 16, but across all 17 goals. Development is an end in itself and a central part of our work. But while sustaining peace is not the only aim of the 2030 Agenda, implementing all the Sustainable Development Goals will make an enormous contribution to sustaining peace." So there's no doubt about the linkages. They're explicit. They're inside the goals themselves in a very clear way. And I think we are also, in a sense, quoting Pope Paul VI, who said that development is the new name of peace in Populorum Progressio 50 years ago this year, in fact. And so that is absolutely part of the agenda. I would urge you to add two more pieces to your list, which I'm sure are there. But the inherent complexity of ethnicity and statehood is not a simple matter. The claim that every ethnic group should be a state or that every state should be of an ethnic group is as much a source of conflict as not. And so one would not want to in any way oversimplify that. And the right to self-determination, so-called, that was to end all war in the Versailles Treaty, some have claimed ended all peace. So first, I would not say that there's an easy answer to that question at all. Is Catalonia a state? Is Kurdistan a state? Who has the claims? What are the prerogatives, especially since no place is really ethnically homogeneous to begin with? And claims of ethnic homogeneity have led as much to ethnic cleansing as to peace. The second thing that I think is really important to say about the conflict in Iraq, ISIS, and the conflict in Syria and so forth, to go back to John Mearsheimer, is that the United States caused a lot of the violence of the last generation. And it was the war in Iraq, it was CIA operations in Afghanistan, it was CIA operations in Syria, and elsewhere. Big power, not local, big powers that created a lot of the turmoil that opened up the door to mass violence. And this is, the Anglo-American world has been at it for 200 years. It's important to appreciate, of course, how much turmoil has come from the outside interventions in these regions. I know you know these things, but I think it's just important to say these are not local conflicts by and large. They are a mix of local and regional and global, and the global actors have made a mess of this region for 100 years now in a very unhappy way. So I'm really happy that you said what you did at the end. Everybody, please read Agenda 2030. Please do that homework. Please read the goals and the targets and the indicators. You will find your interests there. And by emphasizing that these are global objectives and that you're part of global objectives, you find a home and you promote what you want. This is empowering for you to place what we're all interested in a context in which the world has said we want this, doesn't know how to achieve it, but we want it. And so that's why I think it's really very valuable to note that. So when you started saying, I don't do the SDGs, of course you do the SDGs. And I'm not surprised that you do, given your interests. But of course you're doing them, and you're promoting them too.
Thank you very much. We've got a couple of more minutes for any more comments, questions. Khalid?
On the topic of war and peace, I just wanted to know what the UN is doing at the moment in terms of the Rohingya crisis. Are you able to hear me? Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. In terms of the Rohingya crisis that's going on right now, we're seeing one of the worst examples of ethnic cleansing going on at the moment. One of the worst examples of what is close to being a genocide. Hundreds of thousands of people being displaced out of their own homeland. Do we need any more evidence to show that this is something that's really, really important right now? And what steps can we do as youth campaigners to bring this message? And in an era of fake news, what can we do to show that this thing is really happening and people are losing their lives over something that should not be the case?
Thank you for that. Anyone wishes to answer that question? 2 minutes.
If you want, either as a group or individually, to make a statement about the Rohingya, I would suggest that we, you or we, subscribe to the initiative of Muhammad Yunus, who has called on the UN Security Council and the world leaders repeatedly, together with Nobel laureates, peace laureates, and many others, to be far more decisive in this issue. And Professor Yunus is doing a very important work of civil society, and since he's a Nobel Peace Prize laureate, calling on his fellow Nobel Peace Prize laureate who is failing in this right now to step up. So this is something practical that we could do in terms of voice, at least.
Great, thank you. So I think that brings the session to a close, unless we have one final comment from anyone from the panel. Yes, briefly.
Thank you, Anja, for your question about being a volunteer and the role of being a volunteer. I think for myself it was the best decision I could ever have done. You get a global understanding, global responsibility. If you are able to see different cultures, different traditions, you get open-minded. And that's also, I think it's connected with the crisis of values. I came back home and it was like really, because I saw something what I came back home and all the problems I faced, they were not there anymore. So that's like, yeah, I don't know how to say it. All that values I gained, I miss them in my environment here. Yeah, and to Johannes about GBV, I think, just to make it short, I experienced that women in cases where they got affected by GBV, they are not aware that they are in a GBV case, so they don't know, a woman who got abused don't know that it's wrong that her husband is violating her. She thinks it's normal that the husband is coming back home at night and is forcing her to have sex. So it's like, it's a lot of awareness, education, and also parenting. Sexual education, sexual issues, it's like a taboo topic. So that's important to close the gap between the parents and also the children in such countries. And also about financial, independence, like economical violence. They are not aware that they are financial depending on their husband. It's also a Western society problem, I would say. And yeah, it's just about awareness.
Thank you. Briefly, thank you.
About the question whether gender equality brings development, I'll say there's no doubt there. It will enable a country to reach to its full potential, so of course, there's no doubt there.
If we can bring the microphone closer a bit, thank you.
Okay. About the question whether development triggers gender equality, usually yes. But for example, in my country, back in like centuries ago, there were queens as leaders in my country. But now, if women can't even campaign as presidents because it's controversial, and there are some disagreements in Islam about that. So I wouldn't say just development will bring gender equality, but it has a lot of aspects like religion, customs. And about the question about involving lawyers and stakeholders, Women in Democracy is currently involved in that. We are going to launch a one-year project to compile an action agenda for progress on gender equality, involving all the stakeholders in Maldives, including all the politicians from all the parties. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we'll bring this session to a close, and we'll have, please everyone be back here by 3:15 so that we can start the next session and we have some discussion time as well. So thank you very much, and it's been wonderful. Please give our panel one last round of applause.